Uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco, cinco, seis. The aim of a research program, my dear Hogan, is not to discover new information. Here, we already know that the German pilots are superior. We are merely furnishing scientific proof. The point of cheating is not necessarily to win. We already know we are going to win. Here, we are merely forcing the inevitable to occur even quicker. The point of election fraud is not to win an election. The Democrats already know they're going to win an election. The point of an election fraud is just to make sure they win the election. Ideas don't change. Across time, across history, ideas remain constant. The wording of those ideas, the phraseology, how you state the idea, that may change, but the idea itself does not change. I'm Aurian Archive, and this is Chaos Theory. And where I find myself today is wanting to comment on two very distinct subjects. The first is Bayonetta 3. Now, if you are not a fan of the Bayonetta series, uh, which you the quick introduction of what's going on is that the original voice actress for the character of Bayonetta basically demanded Mark Hamill level money for being a voice actress. Now, I've done some voice acting, and I can tell you straight up front that voice actors not only normally don't get the recognition they deserve for their roles, they also don't get the paychecks they deserve. Most voice actors, if they are forced to work for the Screen Actors Guild, must sign up and adhere to the Screen Actors Guild, and that is especially true in relation to how they are paid. Most voice actors are basically paid on a scale wage. That is to say, they are paid the minimum amount for the work that they do. And to be fair, if you are voice acting a popular character that has millions of sales and is considered profitable, yes, you probably should be offered a little bit more money than simply being offered a scale wage. And we know for a fact that the original voice actress of Bayonetta was, in fact, offered almost $20,000 US dollars, basically a mid range for some people that would be for a minimum wage person, that's what, a year, a $20,000 salary. That's good money for what probably would have only been 5 or 6 voice sessions. So basically $20,000 for less than an entire week's worth of work. That's actually a lot of money for not doing very much. I mean, okay, yes, you're having to match voice intonation, you're having to express a character, you're having to convince the person who's playing the game that the character they're hearing is a person with their own identity. I mean, okay, yeah, sure, but that's still. But then that voice actress got cagey and started saying that she was only offered $4,000 total, not 20K plus. Uh, and there's been enough sketchy information where we know that the voice actress was not telling the entire truth that we can kind of, well, discard her version of the events of how she was not being paid, and that she rejected what appears to have been a very acceptable offer to voice Bayonetta for a third time. And because we know one of her demands, she wanted residuals, basically profits over time. She wanted continuing money from future sales. Now, to be fair, this is not an unreasonable request for voice actors, especially in the terms of gaming. Video games are a long tail economic model. What that means is that a good game today is a good game tomorrow, a good game the day after that, a good game the day after that, a good game a year after that, a good game 2 years after that, a good game 3 years after that, a good game a decade after that, a good game 50 years from now. A good game does not stop being a good game. Now, point in case, I really like Cyberpunk 2077. I think it is one of the best handling implementations of a pen and paper style role playing game into the video game world that I have ever played. It is what the game accomplishes is in some ways astounding. The world that it brings to life and puts you as the player in the middle of. Cyberpunk doesn't stop being a good game, or Cyberpunk 2077 doesn't stop being a good game tomorrow. It doesn't stop being a good game to play next year. It doesn't ever stop being a good game to play. So as a game, it continues to hold value. The question is, how much value does that game hold? How much are you willing to pay for that game in the future? How much are you willing to pay the developers to keep working on the game? So for a voice actor who voices a character in a game, who has a substantial presence in the game, asking for residuals, asking for payments over time that they get a share of all copies ever sold is probably not unreasonable, simply on the basis that that game, if it's good, in 50 years' time, could probably still be being sold. That voice actor could probably maybe still be receiving an income, maybe as not as much of an income, but still some income for the work that they put into that game. So the request itself was not actually unreasonable, at least from a voice actor standpoint, at least not from a, if you view gaming as a long tail economic standpoint, the request was quite reasonable. But we also know that the total amount of money that the voice actress wanted up front was substantially greater than other equivalent roles with the equivalent amount of work needed to be being provided. Again, going back to the statement, Mark Hamill money. If you want to purchase Mark Hamill to be your voice actor, you're going to have to pay Mark Hamill enough for him to ignore whatever else he's working on, to put aside whatever other projects people are paying him to work on, or you want to buy some of his schedule. If you are a voice actor and you don't have a lot of gigs, you probably should take every gig you can get, because that's how you make your money. That's why you have voice actors like Jennifer Hale, who have voiced numbers of different characters, because that's how they make their living. They take as many gigs as they can. So, and part of this is driven by a number of publishers are intent on treating video gaming as a short tail economic model. That is to say, a game released today has no value next year. In case in point, any sports game, EA Soccer 2022, has no value as a soccer game in 2023. There must be an updated roster. There must be a new game. The old game has no value. And we see this like with Borderlands. Borderlands 1, still a very good game. It's never going to stop being a good game. But because it's a previous game, it doesn't have an intrinsic value as a long tail game. So when you're stuck with publishers who continue to treat gaming as a short tail economic model where they must recoup all of their investments within a period of months after the game launch, rather than looking to still be recouping that investment 20 years later and still being profitable 20 years later, they're looking for 20 weeks or less. So yes, that's under 2 years if you needed time to process that. So I don't, how the voice actress presented herself, how she's presented the offer she was made, was sketchy. She didn't tell the full truth. And that's actually caused a different problem, because this voice actress went out and encouraged people to boycott purchasing Bayonetta 3. And then now she turned around and asked everyone who follows her who boycotted Bayonetta 3, who did not buy Bayonetta 3, to put that money towards anti-abortion advertisements. Now, to be perfectly fair, from my own perspective, I don't like murder privilege. And that's what abortion is. Abortion is murder privilege. I don't like people who get cagey about what they talk about when they talk about abortion. As Herschel Walker eloquently pointed out, the Democrat talking point of a doctor's room is crowded with the mother and the doctor in there, the government needs to get out, they're still talking about taxpayer-funded abortion. they're still lying about the government being in a room. They're also not talking about the father, who for some reason is not in the room, and they're not talking about the baby, who is indefinitely in the room. So I don't disagree with an anti-abortion advocacy. I don't disagree with people pointing out the logical flaws in the Democrats' argument. I don't disagree with people pointing out that, yes, it's your body, but that baby has its own body. Yes, it's your body, but you did this with another person. You took two people. Both of you probably should have a say in this. And yes, I do take very explicit issue with, okay, so you can't afford a baby after purchase. That's why we have this thing called adoption. And there are people out there who cannot have a baby. No matter what they do, they may be born sterile. They may have been forcibly sterilized by their parents. Those kind of people, if they want a kid, their only option is abortion. Well, if you're capable of carrying a baby and you can put a baby up for adoption, well, now we have a good case here for something a government probably, or taxpayer could probably say, yes, we'd like to spend our money on this service. We'd like to have a service where someone who has a baby who cannot financially afford to raise that baby or does not want to raise that baby, we can find a family for that baby, and we will absorb the cost of caring for that baby until that family can be found. That's something where uh, if you talk about it in those terms, can ensuring the continuation of the next generation. And okay, fine, if you're not financially um, capable of caring for the baby, we can do something about that. We as taxpayers agree this is what we'd like to spend our money on. We don't want to spend our money on paying a doctor to rip that child out of your womb. So I don't disagree with what the voice actress decided she would like people who boycotted Bayonetta 3 to spend that money on, but I entirely disagree with her being the right person to make that advocacy. If you have done something sketchy, if you have been busted for lying, if you have been busted for not telling the truth, for not being forthright, and you want to then make a political stance or a social value stance, you've ruined your credibility. It doesn't matter what argument you're making. It doesn't matter how sane or how logical it is. Once you've crossed that line and demonstrated that you are willing to lie, that you're not going to tell the truth when something happens, or you're not willing to tell the truth that you made demands that somebody else was not willing to say, yeah, okay, we'll do that. You're not willing to say that that you listened to a counteroffer. Once you've proven that, or once it's been proved, if it takes an outside party, once it's been proved that you are the sus person here, you've damaged the credibility of anything else you choose to promote. Now, having said that, you could make a fair argument that this is a classic socialist red flag, false flag play, where the voice actress knows that she's screwed up, that she's now definitely a terrible model, that most people are now going to be looking at her with some form of suspicion. She's probably not going to be able to get a job voice acting again. She may even have difficulty getting a job in theater, where I believe she originally came from as a theater actress. Simply because everyone's going to be like, if we make you an offer, we offer you a contract, how do we know that you're not going to turn around and spin the details of that contract wrong? What if you're going to go out and talk about, we hired you to be this lead in this play, and you go out and say, well, they didn't actually pay me what I think I'm worth, or you say something else about the production, you have now self-inflicted a black mark onto yourself, or anyone else in your industry or the industries that you work in are going to be very suspicious of anything you have to say. You're not going to get the offers you want to get, and then you want to turn around and turn your black mark and turn it towards a political basis. Well, either you're incredibly stupid. There's a couple different options here. You could be incredibly stupid. I'm not so sure stupid is really an option that's in play here. Simply because you don't get to be a voice actor by being stupid. You've got to have some smarts and some ability to deal with people and some ability to calculate what's going to happen. You have to be able to express emotion. If you're going to convince somebody that you are a completely different person just through your voice acting alone. So, okay, probably isn't stupid. Lack of self-awareness. Okay, we actually do see this a lot in the Hollywood type, where a political celebrity or a social celebrity says something that's incredibly stupid. Case in point, weapon control. There's dozens of Hollywood anti-weapon activists who have their own license, have a personal weapon, and hire security guards armed with personal weapons to defend themselves. So if you are saying that, um, why did that job just get updated? I may have to reload and go focus on that job. All right, let's keep an eye. Oh, that's where I got updated. The cab is down here. All right, we'll just keep an eye on that job. I really don't want to go to right now because I'll get distracted, like I just did. Anyway, so the original voice actress. Okay, self-awareness. And again, I was making the point that you have these Hollywood types who rant against weapons, but then carry their own or glorify the weapons and the usage of those weapons in the entertainment pictures that they make, and turn around and say, well, rules for me, but not for thee. I can have a gun, but you can't have a gun. I can have a rifle, but you can't have a rifle. I can have bodyguards, but you can't have bodyguards. I can defend myself, but you can't defend yourself. And the lack of awareness of what they're saying, the lack of the hypocrisy is egregious. It's entirely notable. Uh, and that's so we could be seeing that with the original voice actress here for Bayonetta. She may not be aware of the suspicion that she's brought upon herself. Legitimately, she may have no idea that uh, now everything she says is tainted by she's been busted for not telling the entire truth before. Maybe she just doesn't realize how bad a look this is to be making a political advocacy after having been busted as someone who's not telling the full truth. And then there's kind of another option that maybe she is a pro murder privilege activist. Maybe she really wants murder privilege to be an issue that affects the average voter. And she figures she already knows, she's self-aware that knows that she has ruined her credibility. She knows that she is suspicious. She knows that, collectively speaking, an outside observer who's looking at what's going on is kind of going, something's not right here. If you're promoting something and I know you're a liar, what's the catch? So she could be trying to destroy anti-abortion advocacy by promoting anti-abortion advocacy, which comes back to that's a very traditional socialist activity or a socialist mental game. You get somebody who people know, don't trust, to advocate for something you want destroyed, and the people who are you don't trust, when they start advocating something you want destroyed, you get an organic negative reaction to whatever it is you're trying to get destroyed. So by having somebody whose ethical and moral compass has definitely been skewed one way or another, declaring support for an anti-abortion position, that may get people who would otherwise not be concerned or not consider anti-abortion or anti murder privilege to be a factor in their decision making, to maybe make position them politically against the restraints against anti-abortion measures, or to say you want somebody who to not necessarily be pro-abortion, but you'd like them to get out of the way of you'd like them to not be advocating for anti-abortion. You want to neutralize them as a political factor so that you can do what you want and just kind of get them out of the way. Now that I'm not saying that's the most likely scenario, because I honestly don't know if that's the most likely scenario. I have never worked with this voice actress. I have never met her. I have never interviewed her. So I really don't have any idea what the position here is why she did what she did. Is she self-aware? Is she not self-aware? So without that kind of information, I'm kind of just firing shots in the dark. But it's something I cannot not comment on because of just how obnoxious it is that for someone to be caught outright saying something that is demonstratively not true and then turn around and advocate for something that I do believe is worth advocating for. It it raises questions that probably need to be answered. So, in the line of raising questions that probably need to be answered, also in this week's news, Paul Pelosi was attacked by a man in his underwear who came out of a hippie commune, and I have questions. Now, we're going to have to deal a bit with Paul Pelosi's uh, security procedures. And we're going to have to go down kind of a rabbit hole here for a second. And that rabbit hole is, how does professional security actually operate? And I kind of wanted to go find a gig where there were security cameras and make a point in game of how security loadouts are treated in Hollywood vernacular, in the common vernacular, what you see in movies, what you see in games, how Cyberpunk 2077 handles security systems, how Deus Ex handles security systems, how I'm thinking Rage 2 Rage 2 just had Dogs. I'm trying to think of any other open world game without addressing Watch Dogs, because I'll be here all day if I start ranting about Watch Dogs. Alright, so not any cameras around here. I think I'm trying to think of things that people may have actually played. No One Lives Forever. A number of people may have played that. For the most part, most people view security cameras as used in movies or television shows to be basically unidirectional. You have a cone of view. It is a very distinct cone of view, and the camera sweeps back and forth. And if you hijack the camera, you interrupt the camera, you put something over the camera, and now you've interrupted the ability of the camera to view, and now you can sneak by the camera. Okay, to be fair, there are a number of camera systems that work like that, and there are very good reasons that you have focal length cameras. And one of those reasons is cost. It is very inexpensive to build a focal length camera. You can put all of the equipment that you need inside of the camera. Let's see if there's a camera in here. Anything I can ping off of? Just turrets. And I'm in one of the more difficult sections of the city, so we may have already, at some point during the game, the game actually changes from the focal length cameras to a more serious camera configuration that you would actually probably see leveraged in a out of their reach. Why are they still coming after? Question for another time. Alright, I'm pretty sure there's some cameras up this way that I can get a look on. Yeah, I probably should have gone and found a camera first before starting this recording. Alright, that didn't go so well. Let's check this. May not be able to get in here yet. No, I can't get in here yet. Out of all the times you want to find a camera, there's just no cameras to be found. And the reason I kind of want to go just down this rabbit hole with the cameras real quick, because this will help set up some of the questions that I definitively have surrounding Paul Pelosi and the attack and the security systems that are in place. There's turrets, but cameras, not turrets. Of course, with my rampage through the city, I may have already taken out most of the cameras. Alright, safe area. Vendors. Out of all the times you want a camera, are there any gigs around here? One gig down that way. Let's make this trip a little shorter. Maybe not much shorter given the way I'm driving badly. I just realized there's a spot where I can go back to where I can find.
Too far.
Cameras. Yes, the vehicle handling, or at least this vehicle doesn't handle all that great. I think I know where this is. All right. Actually, that guard will do. Some Okay, let's do a quick ping. Did I seriously pick a gig with no cameras? Somehow I picked a gig with no cameras but lots of enemies. That was real smooth. Oh, load a checkpoint. Let's go back and load a specific game. Okay. All right. Can I still get in? All right, turn on. All right, and I realized I just went back to almost where I started the video off at. All right, here we are looking at what most people think of as a security camera. And as we look at the camera, we can see that it has a specific point, a field of view. We know which way the camera is pointed. It's on a mechanical gimbal. It's pointing somewhere. We can track it. Thus, we can also hide from it. We can also, at least in movies, imprint our own image, get it to not recognize it, get it to look us over. And this isn't the kind of camera that you would actually see used in a serious security scenario. So this is where I decided that going back and actually showing a camera will help give some perspective over what people expect and what you actually get in a secure security scenario. I realize that sounds redundant. It is redundant. But to understand this, I have to go into what can be a difficult concept for some people to grasp, and that is the concept of zero faith security. What zero faith security means, in essence, is you don't trust the weapon you have on you. If you have a weapon on you that's visible, you have two more weapons on you that are not visible. So if you are carrying a Glock in your waistband holster that is visible, you probably have an airweight or other revolver in an ankle bracelet, and you probably have a subcompact either in your pocket or in an inside the belt holster. And then on top of that, you probably have a heavier weapon, either a larger revolver like the Taurus Judge, or a sawed-off pistol shotgun, or a subcompact machine gun like a P90, or a bullpup like an IWIX-95 or a Tavor 7. You have something heavy armor that's within close reach that you can get to. You don't have just one weapon, you have a variety of fallback weapons. And some of those weapons you may only have not necessarily to inflict damage on an attacker. You may have to buy you time to get to another weapon that can inflict damage. Like, say, your inside the belt holster might be a 22. With a 22, you're not going to be doing much damage to an attacker if you're at any substantial range. But that 22, those 15, 16 rounds of 22 in your inside waistband pistol, okay, I know that's an over-exaggeration, probably more like 15 to 18, but again, we're looking at bespoke weapons for a security detail. You're going to use the 22s to plink at your target and buy you time to move, to get to a heavier weapon that can punch through additional hard cover, or can punch through soft cover. So that's the first thing here. As a security detail, you don't trust the weapons that you have, or you don't trust what's visible. You have a backup plan. You have, this weapon jams, this weapon stops, this weapon runs out, this is where I go next. And then you train for that. You train for, you fired all of your rounds, drop, move to the next weapon. Don't reload, don't time to reload, drop the weapon, next weapon. and all you're doing is buying yourself time to move from weapon to weapon. So that's one aspect of zero faith security. You don't trust your weapons to work. You hope they work, you plan on them working, but you also plan on them not working, and you have fallback options. The second step in zero faith security is you don't trust cameras. You don't trust that the camera is being faithful to you. You don't trust that it's showing you an uninterrupted image. If you think something is wrong, you check it out. More importantly, you do not check it out alone. In a zero faith security scenario, you have somebody backing your six. You have somebody who is physically there with you, covering you as you move from room to room or door to door or wall to wall to check every single step that you make. And likewise, they are also going to be zero faith with their weapons. If something goes wrong, they have a fallback plan that they have trained and drilled to go to. Drop the weapon in hand, go for the waistband holster, run out of the waistband holster, go for the ankle holster, run out of the ankle holster. By that time, you should be at your next weapon, which may be in a gun case, maybe in a closet, maybe in a secure box. Wherever it is, by that time you should have enough rounds to get yourself from point A to point B for your next weapon, which hopefully will be a heavier weapon. All right, so not only do you not trust cameras, you don't trust yourself to watch cameras. And it's a common trope we see in security movie after security movie. You have a multi-screen setup. Somebody's got a desktop or something where they've got multiple monitors set up where they can view all these windows at once. Well, if you go and talk to the flight industry, highly suggest channels like Mentor Pilot or 74 Gear. One of the things they always talk about is pilot load or pilot workload. Now, in pilot workload, there is a finite amount of information that a single person can focus on, can dedicate their attention to. And time after time, a number of accidents in the aviation world have occurred because the pilots were so focused on one set of tasks, they didn't notice an alarm or an alarm didn't register. Now, if you're in other fields of work, you may notice that as well. If you work in the restaurant industry, and somebody tells you no lettuce on that burger, but it's not printed on your receipt, no lettuce on that burger, and you've got 14 burgers that you're working on, it may not register that the no lettuce burger is either the next one, the second one, the third one, the fourth one, the fifth one down. You need an extra reminder there when you get to that point that this is a no lettuce burger, don't put lettuce on it. But because of your workload, because you're at your limit, you're focused on all these different ingredients, the burgers, the other timers that are going off, it may not register that this burger didn't need lettuce. And then you have an unhappy customer. It's like, well, they're not paying attention. Well, the message may have been passed, but that person may have been at their limit of whatever workload they can handle. So one of the things, and this is especially true in the airline industry, they work to lower the amount of workload that any particular person has. They work to lower, you have one pilot who's flying, you've got a pilot monitoring. And a pilot monitoring, by splitting up these workloads, reduces the amount of attention that a pilot needs to spend on anything that's not in their defined workload, if they spend any attention time on it all. That's the whole point of having a second person there. And that is true in the security industry. You don't legitimately have 40 screen monitor walls, each with a different camera. Rather, if you have cameras set up that you are using to monitor a property, first of all, you're going to be using wide angle cameras, either 270 degrees or 360 degrees camera. You're going to have it's going to be like that ball you see in grocery stores or gas station that just hangs down. You have a wide angle view showing you a substantial amount of area at once. And you're going to set these cameras up, these wide angle cameras up, or these 360 degree cameras angles up, so that they all overlap around whatever property you're trying to secure. And then you're going to only limit the number of images that any one security guard looks at. The ideal amount is somewhere between 3 to 4 different cameras for a single person to focus on. So if you are capable of securing a household with 4 cameras, one at each corner with wide angle displays, you can have one person watching those cameras. But once you go up to 5 or 6 cameras, you're not going to have one person watching them. You're not going to have one security guard sitting at the desk with a whole bunch of security monitors in front of them trying to watch each one. That's not how workload works. That's not how attention spans work. They're going to lose track. They're not going to notice if something funny, or they probably may not notice something out of the unusual across that many screens. It just doesn't happen. That's not how human attention spans work. So, if you're in a zero-phase security environment, not only are you going to have the number of cameras limited, where if you have basically an unlimited budget, and for practical purposes, we can say the Pelosi's had an unlimited budget to work with, you're going to have a single security guard for every 3 cameras, whose only job is to look at those 3 cameras and those 3 cameras alone. Now, once we understand it, then we can also move to the next step of zero-phase security. You don't have a single security guard who stares at one camera. You don't have a security guard who only looks at this camera, and that camera down there for their 8-hour shift. No. In a zero-phase security environment, you switch off every hour or every 2 hours, depending on the security environment. In some cases, you'll swap off every 30 minutes. If you're in a high maximum security, you're guarding something like a nuclear missile, you're probably swapping shifts every 15 minutes. In fact, you've probably got even less people watching a display for something that high secure. Especially if you think there's an active threat, you could be watching only one camera and you're relieved every 15 minutes. Now, why do you do that? Well, first of all, it helps reduce the amount of, that camera's gone on the fritz, or I saw a shadow. It makes the person watching the cameras less complacent, less work tired. By swapping out every app, and again, the maximum you really want to sit in front of a camera is 2 hours. If you're sitting in front of a camera for more than 2 hours, sitting in front of a monitor watching through a camera, after 2 hours, your attention span is going to decrease. You are more liable to make mistakes, period. Don't care about your training. Don't care about what you did for a living. You're going to lose your ability to pay attention. Swap out. Somebody else takes over, period. And again, we're dealing with zero faith here. We're saying we don't trust the equipment. We don't trust anything. We have zero faith in it. We're going to verify everything. We're going to swap out on a regular basis. And for a congressional or senatorial representative whose family is at stake, you want zero-faith security. If you're not paying for zero-faith security, I have questions, especially if you're in a high-crime environment. And we know that this is an environment where we're talking about a physical wall around a house and a security detail of at least 6 people, or at least 6 employees at any given time. So, going back to your security protocols. First of all, you're carrying multiple weapons. You don't trust your weapons to work. You plan on something going wrong. You don't trust your cameras. You limit the amount of time that you're looking at any one camera, and if something goes wrong, because you have such a limited amount of workload to look at, if one camera goes offline, flickers, does something funny, you go and you check it out, period. You go with backup. You grab somebody else to tag your 6 and look behind you. So this is the outline of a zero-phase security environment, which, given everything that Nancy Pelosi has done in her career, would certainly result in a number of people who have a legitimate reason to see her locked up and arrested. And you can very easily imagine a patriot serving her an arrest warrant at her house and having to go through her security to serve that warrant and then haul her butt out of there, slam her in the back of a patrol car, and drop her off at the local precinct to stand trial. Yeah, you can imagine that scenario very easily. Doesn't take any imagination at all. The real big question is, why haven't the U.S. Marshals done this? Okay, so once we keep that in mind, what kind of security situation we should be looking at where the premises probably has enough cameras that there is no uncovered camera spot on the perimeter. We've probably got enough security guards on site at any given time that those cameras, all of those angles, can be monitored so that each guard only has 3 or 4 screens at most to keep attention of. So 3 or 4 cameras at most to keep attention of, where we're looking at the security guards that probably drill and train for this weapon goes down, we move to this weapon, who drill and train for there's something just went wrong here, back me up while we look over each other's shoulder. We're running zero phase security here. So once you have that in mind, what's going on, then the idea of somebody in their underwear with a hammer making it over the wall, past the security team, and inside the house to actually have a struggle with Paul Pelosi doesn't just sound sus, it sounds freaking impossible. We're either talking about the most incompetent security team on the planet who have no idea what they're doing, and legitimately let the husband of a sitting congressional representative come to harm or come near to harm. We're either talking about something that is functionally impossible to contemplate. Somebody who managed to get past the walls, get past the cameras, get past the security team. And we're not talking about this is not the Walmart security cop who's basically being paid to ignore the shoplifters. We're talking about people who legitimately believe that Paul Pelosi could be under lethal attack, either from the Chinese, who have legitimate reasons to maybe want Paul Pelosi taken down to send a message to Nancy, or from U.S. Marshals trying to serve a warrant that's decades overdue. And I realize I'm getting excited and shouting at this point, so I'm going to try and dial it back a notch. We're either looking at a huge failure of the security team in regard to personal security, or we're not looking at a failure of the security team at all. And this goes back to what I opened this stream with, where I talk about the voice actress of Bayonetta. Now, there's a reason I'm not saying her name. Yes, I could go easily look it up and say it. I'm not saying her name because I realize this could be asymmetrical warfare. I could upload this video, it could get rapidly shared around, and then we have people who go and harass her. Well, don't want you to do that. I don't know what's going on with her. I haven't talked to her. I don't know her. I don't know what her motivations are. So please, if you have opinions on what she's done one way or the other, use your own forums to express those however you want to express it, but don't take it out on her personally. But the reason why I bring up false flag operations is that to the socialist idea, and remember the socialist ideology is socialists control the means of production, but they are not responsible for the means of production. Socialism is effectively the ideology of irresponsibility, not taking blame. And that's where we get the idea of the false flag operation, where somebody does something to blame somebody else. We see it a lot in popular media, where a right-wing fascist extremist, which linguistically just drives me all sorts of bonkers, goes out and steals a nuclear bomb or steals a chemical weapon. NCIS had this in a very early episode, where a fascist right-wing militia was threatening domestic terrorism. Well, first of all, you don't know what fascism means. You literally have no idea what fascism means. It's literally comes out of the kalos, to bundle together, to commune together, enforced communism. That's what fascism means. It's a leftist ideology. It's not a right ideology. Benito Mussolini was not a right-wing extremist. He was a socialist. So, but the idea that the political right wing, and again, the political right wing effectively is no government. The political right wing is not just limited government. The political right wing is no government. Get your hands out of my wallet. I make my own decisions. I'm responsible for my own decisions. Effectively, at the end of the day, the extreme ends of the right-wing ideology is anarchy. It's no government. So once we keep in mind that our portrayal of false flag operations in the media are almost always coming from leftist writers fantasizing about what they could get away with if they were a right-winger. They're not writing about what an actual right-wing ideology would lead to. They're writing about what a left-wing ideology would lead to and then calling it right-wing ideology. It doesn't work that way. False flag operations are effectively the home team decide, and the example is, okay, there's going to be the US is at risk of a chemical weapons attack. Well, we're going to initiate a chemical weapons attack on our own soil so that everyone can see how weak we are against a chemical attack. We'll take some lives in order to improve our defenses. This is a classical fictional false flag operation. You attack your own side so that your own side is forced to respond and up their game. This is also a socialist ideology. It's almost a blueprint of how a socialist operation works. You want to do something, you're controlling the means of production, but you don't want to be responsible for it. You don't want to introduce the legislation to defend against chemical weapons. You don't want to uh, bring up the topic of defending against chemical weapons. But you figure if you kill some people, then the other people will bring up the topic, then they'll agree to spend the money, and now you've gotten what you wanted. You've controlled the means of production, but you're not actually responsible for it. Nobody can prove that you're the one who actually launched the chemical weapons, now can they? That's the whole thing of a false flag operation. It's the idea behind it that you're forcing one behavior by committing an action that others must respond to. And the left loves false flag operations because they always envision that is what the political right would do. But at the end of it, the false flag operation is effectively an irresponsible operation. You're taking an action, but you're not taking responsibility for that action. That's a leftist ideology. That's not taking an accident and saying, I did this, it's my action, I'm making this choice, I'm responsible for this choice. Yes, I launched a chemical weapon on our own soil, I'm the one who did it, blame me. The entire concept is almost the complete opposite of what an actual right-wing ideology would lead to. And that's why it's so easy for the right wing, for the actual right wing, for people like Alex Jones to launch these conspiracy theories. And the conspiracy theory that Sandy Hook was a false flag operation. Now, Alex Jones lost in court because people actually died. We can dig up the grave, we can find the body. So either we're looking at, let's say Alex Jones was right for a second. We're either looking at gross malfeasance on the part of federal operatives to launch an attack against their own, to launch an attack against their own people, or we're looking at more likely somebody who was coerced and pushed into becoming a weapon. We're looking at someone who is ideologically distanced. And there's a good song out there by Cell Dweller Blue Stolly, and I've read off the lyrics before. Make them pay. How the leftist ideology pushes the mass shooter concept. How they push make yourself famous, go over the edge. And when you understand that the idea of a false flag operation, that the idea of targeting people and making people into weapons is almost entirely the result of a socialist ideology, we can step back and look at what happened with Paul Pelosi and start asking our questions about where did this guy come from? We know he came from what was described as a hippie commune. This wasn't some right-wing capitalist spending his own money on his own business and paying taxes and doing his best to survive from day to day under a Democrat regime. This guy was a complete nutcase, at best mentally imbalanced, possibly even brain damaged. So how did he get brain damaged? Why was he living where he was living at? The more questions we have about where this guy came from, we know he's definitely not anyone who would identify as a foundationalist. So how did he get the idea to attack Paul Pelosi? How did he get the hammer? How did he get past security? How did he get over the wall? How did he get in? How did he do this in his underwear? At what point did nobody notice this? So from the political right, the right-wing ideology, it's very easy to look at the Paul Pelosi events and come to the very logical conclusion that it's a setup. The Democrats needed a violent action to blame on the grand old party. They needed a violent action to blame on the Republicans. They needed to silence the conservatives. They needed to do something to stop the raging red tsunami. Well, how do you do that? You can't win on policy. You've got everyone who went up and tried to debate on policy from the Democrat side got their butt handed to them in a sling. And one of the few Democrats who decided not to debate, well, she's obviously more chicken than Colonel Sanders' favorite recipe. Can't believe I did that. So, as we look at it from a neutral perspective, as we try to look at the facts we can gather, we can immediately conclude that the chances of this being a random occurrence are very limited. So the next question is, why Paul Pelosi? Why choose him? Well, first of all, he's an elderly man. Realistically, he probably should not have been able to physically fend off an assailant. Secondly, Paul Pelosi has made a fool of the Democrat Party, and more specifically his wife, Nancy Pelosi. Everyone knows by now that if the justice system in Paul Pelosi's case had been acted upon procedure, evidence released per procedure, sentencing performed upon procedure, then Paul Pelosi would still be in a jail cell. He would not be roaming around free. He would be being very careful not to drop the soap every single night. So once we understand that Paul Pelosi is an embarrassment to the Democrat Party, he has shown quite clearly that it's rules for thee, not for me. Has shown quite clearly that there is a difference between the criminal justice system as applied to the average American and a criminal justice system as applied to the Democrats. He's now become the most dangerous thing possible in the political world. He's expendable. He's a frail, elderly man. Probably shouldn't have even been able to protect himself against an actual assailant, but that's why they have security, so that an actual assailant can't get to him. That's why they have a wall around their house, so that an actual assailant can't get to him. So we now have a motive, which is in a criminal investigation a very important thing, a very important part of the process. We can prove that Paul Pelosi attacked, dead, or in a hospital in a coma are all beneficial to Nancy Pelosi, to the Democrat Party. This is an embarrassment that has now been erased. He cannot embarrass the Democrat Party any further, at least through this election cycle, if he remains alive. And if you're thinking, wait, are you suggesting that Nancy Pelosi took out a hit on her husband? I don't know. I am going to state for the record that Nancy Pelosi, based on her behavior, based on her willingness to punch a former president in the face for trespassing, for the action she has taken in commissioning acts of war against other nations, for the funding that she has approved over the years for acts of war to be committed, for everything that Nancy Pelosi has done in the past, asking me to not believe that she would take out a hit on her own husband, that's something I cannot. She has not demonstrated the empathy or moral compassion for me as a person to believe that she would not be capable of such an act. I can look at her political record and go, yes, she does strike me as exactly the kind of person who, if given the opportunity, would give the order to kill someone like Jeffrey Epstein. I can believe that she's part of the corrupt Clinton crime family. I can believe that she is invested with the Biden crime family. I can believe that she helped and abated Obama in his open corruption and the destruction of the U.S. military. I can believe that she would very quickly take out a hit on her own husband because he's an embarrassment. And let's say you could possibly, plausibly convince me that no, they do actually love each other, that no, they don't spend all this time apart, and Paul Pelosi doesn't have all of these young girls that he's able to go have fun with. No, they really love each other. Nancy would never do that to her husband. Can you really say the same about other operatives of the Democrat Party? About the actual field agents? The ones at the heart of the DNC? Can you really say to me that Soros, who sold out his own religion, the Jewish citizens of Germany, you're really going to tell me that Soros wouldn't put out a hit on someone who's an embarrassment to the Democrat Party after Soros already helped send his own countrymen to the ovens and the gas chambers in the National Socialist left-wing Germany? Really? Because if you think you can convince me of that, I've got a bridge to sell you that's under the earth. So even if you could possibly convince me that Nancy wouldn't actually take out a contract on her husband, you cannot possibly convince me that other Democrat parties and other Democrat donors and representatives and operatives in play would not do the same themselves. Sorry, this is how they've operated. We've got a long list of bodies lying in morgues due to Democrats saying that person's got to die now. That person can't testify in court. That person can't continue to be an embarrassment. It used to be a running joke that concrete buildings in Chicago had local politicians buried in the foundations, because that's how the Democrats got rid of their competition. They put them in concrete structures. So, once we establish that there is in fact a motive to arrange an assault against Paul Pelosi, once we understand that there is a reason for why this should happen to this fellow, then we start having to asking, well, why did this person? Because they were easily manipulated. Who did they talk with? Who did they have phone calls with? By look up a quick location of phone GPSs or health fitness reports for the last, call it 2 weeks. Has anyone associated with the Pelosi's also been wandering around this hippie commune? Has anyone been asking questions? Has anyone caught on security camera footage? And if you've got a link between somebody who is attached to Pelosi visiting the hippie commune, well, there's your smoking gun. We now have a definitive link of somebody going and picking out somebody to assault Paul Pelosi. And on top of that, what if there's a possibility that it wasn't supposed to be a lethal assault at all? That, yeah, go take a hammer to him. The security will interrupt just in time, so he'll be damaged, but don't actually kill him. Well, now you have an even possibly more disturbing. You're not just turning a loose cannon upon the relative, the married relative of a sitting congressional representative. You're now giving specific instructions as though this person were a paid hitman or assassination artist. Oh, no, we don't actually want them dead. Just, send a message. Again, we're looking at this is in the history of the Democrat Party, going back to it's something Chicago was infamous for. It's something New York was infamous for. It's something LA is infamous for. Emphasis on is, not was, is. So once we step back, once we start asking hard questions about how did this happen? How could this happen? How does security fail in such a manner? Especially against somebody who is frail, just had a massive car wreck, definitely isn't in 100% top physical condition, definitely being watched over closely by security. How does this happen? And the answer is security stepped aside. Somebody turned off cameras. Somebody opened the gate in the wall. Somebody knew that this attacker was coming. Somebody planned on it. Was it Nancy herself? Was it internal security? Was it a Democrat operative? We may not be able to get those answers, because chances are whoever arranged this is probably already wearing cement shoes and at the bottom of an ocean. I know it's a morbid thought to consider, but realistically, this is how the Democrats have operated in the past. We have no expectation that the Democrats will have ceased these behaviors or these actions in any manner. So once we get past the disturbing implications, the questions that need to be asked over how, we find ourselves circling back to the ideas. Because the ideas don't change. Shaping opinion, making people believe one thing when something else has actually happened. The world around us is filled with propaganda, is filled with personnel on television screens around the world saying one thing over and over and over. What they're saying, it doesn't matter if what they're saying is true or false. They're still just saying it over and over and over. Images all around us are burned into our brain. We see things over and over. We hear things repeated over and over and over. And the narrative out of the Democrat Party is that somehow this hippie commune, this drug-infused, drug-addled collective of U.S. citizens were somehow MAGA Republicans, and that this was a MAGA-incited attack on Paul Pelosi. My answer to that charge is a very simple one. Yes, there are a number of people on the MAGA side who would love to see Paul Pelosi in handcuffs and serving jail time. But you know how we would do that? We would get sworn in as deputies of the law, show up, flash our badges, say, here's the warrant, you're under arrest, you're going to jail. That's how the right actually handles things. The right believes in the idea of laws, in the idea of personal responsibility. The right doesn't act upon assassinations. The right does not act upon assaults. The right acts upon, you stepped over a line, we're going to enforce that line. By blaming MAGA, all Nancy has done, all the Democrats have done, is fueled fire to the righteous indignation, the anger, the pure vitriol the bulk of America has against the Democrats. The idea of this attack being a MAGA plan is so absurd. Even if you don't understand a lick about security planning, even if you're not capable of taking down a Democrat assassin, even if you haven't done that, you still know this smells wrong. The timing's wrong. The events are wrong. How did this happen? People on the right have questions, and those questions were not answered. They weren't even addressed. And that brings us back to the ideas. The Democrats do things not because they do them for a result. They know what they expect the result to be. All they're trying to do is hurry that result up. The Democrats expected to win the November elections, but now that they know that they can't actually win, that the entirety of the country is against the Democrats, even in the deepest blue states where the Democrats are down realistically by 10 to 12 percentage points in the polling that can be managed. And we know that polling is rigged as much as it can be from various parties involved. And this is supposed to turn the tide of public opinion, an assault on Paul Pelosi. We're supposed to believe, without hearing any evidence, that it's a MAGA representative who did this. Yeah, somebody else tried that. His name is Jussie Smollett. And he's now become the butt of a joke, the centerpiece of comedy routines for this action. He's now become a verb to describe how the Democrats false flag operations. We've seen it used by Kari Lake, who declared that it's a Jussie Smollett 2.0. To refer to acts that are obviously undertaken by Democrats, obviously enacted by Democrats on Democrat ideologies. And then someone wants to turn around and say, oh no, the Republicans did it. No, the Republicans didn't do it. You did it. We want to know why. We want answers, and we're going to find out who's responsible, and we're going to lock them up. And they will probably never see the light of day again. I don't like Paul Pelosi. I think he should be in jail. But whoever orchestrated his assault, and if it was Nancy, if you're the one who paid for the assault against your husband, you are more vile than anyone else ever imagined. And I would so hope that I get deputized in the state of California to haul your ass to jail. What you did is wrong. And blaming somebody else for the actions that your party takes is despicable on a level I do not want to imagine, but unfortunately I am perfectly capable of imagining it. More in archive, and I'll catch you later.